Okay, so today I'm in Devon with Paul Willis, far from home, Paul.
Yeah.
Prolific owner based in the USA with horses in training in the USA, Ireland, and here in the UK. So what's the tally currently?
Well, pretty much equal between America and the UK and Ireland. So altogether, if you include Atlantic Friends Racing and horses that I have in America with friends where I might own a leg or a tail or an ear, we have about 40. But I'm definitely not a prolific owner. I'm an enthusiastic owner. That's how I would describe myself. I love horses. Obviously, I much prefer horses over the jumps and what have you. And as I've gotten older, it's just been a passion of mine, and I love it. And the fact that I can be in America and watch a jumps race in the States, or be in America and watch a jumps race over here in England, even if I'm watching it on the telly, it makes me feel like I'm at home. So it's just a real passion for mine.
Okay, and at home now is New Hampshire.
Yeah, I'm in. I went over originally to West Virginia, Wesleyan, on a soccer scholarship, and that was 1984. Graduated, worked for the school, and they allowed me, because I was in admissions, they allowed me to move up to New Hampshire in 1990, and I've lived there with my wife and family ever since. So it's a perfect place to live. One, it's a lot like England. It's, I'm an hour from Boston, which means I'm an hour from the airport. I'm in the flight over. It's funny, I was talking to Nigel's crew this morning, and none of them could understand that it was only a 5-hour flight from Boston to London. So it's dead easy for me to get home. So yeah, couldn't ask for anything nicer.
It would have took them longer to drive up to Newcastle. It took
Yeah,
you to fly.
yeah,
Anyway,
sure.
so we'll go on to the football stuff
Yeah.
in a bit. But going back to the beginning, anybody listening to your accent would know it's the northeast. Originally from Newcastle,
Yeah,
and your father was a racecourse bookmaker.
yeah. So my dad always liked the dogs. He always used to go to Brough Park. I would go with him on a Saturday night at times. This is when Brough Park was actually a grass track, not the sand that they have now. But he really enjoyed that. He'd always been when I say a gambler, I don't mean a gambler like he's throwing money left, right and centre. He was always very shrewd, clever, would weigh up the form, all those kinds of things. And yeah, so he became a bookmaker, and I was just a kid. So him and his mate Jimmy used to, go to various places in the northeast, and then when I got to be like 9 or 10, I would go and just help out. So he might ask me to keep an eye on the boards, and if something gets backed off the board or whatever, to come and tell him and things like that. And that moved on to doing the book, and then doing a little bit of tic-tac as well. So that's, my mum always loved horses, but my dad was the one, by going to the various race courses, that got me into the racing.
Okay, so did he do that for a living? Was that his full-time
No,
job?
he worked for a company called Henry Osborne's in Newcastle. That was an engineering firm, and he was a manager there. And then this ended up being his hobby. So, however many weeks holiday you get in a year, back then, 5 weeks or 6 weeks? I would argue every day that he had a holiday was a day that he went off to the book. So even though it was primarily the north, we would go to Derby, we'd go to the Grand National. We never went to Cheltenham as a bookmaker and stuff. But yeah, it was his hobby, and then I fell in love with it as well. But I fell in love with the jumps more than I did with the flat.
Okay, what name did he bet under? Do you remember?
Vincent Willis, Newcastle.
Somebody's better remember from.
Yeah, so 35 years he was a bookie. We had a retirement day from at Hexham Racecourse. Me and my sister had a special day from up there and stuff. But he loved it, and he was very, very clever. He didn't have a lot of money. He wasn't in Tattersall's. He was in the cheap ring or the silver ring, and he knew, he weighed up the racing and everything. He knew everything about the horses. He wasn't just going there on a whim, lay the favourite or whatever. Many a time I've gone to the races with my dad, he's like, this thing should never be 33 to 1. And he would have me going back at 33 to 1, 40 to 1. Amazing how many times that would end up at 7 to 1. So I always thought he did it the right way. But obviously he didn't have Betfair and all of the other things that you could rely on today.
Yeah, so you started off on the floor then as a floor man, then you clerked, so that would have
Yeah,
been the pencil and the
yeah,
him calling the bets,
yeah.
and a bit of tic-tacking. Can you still remember some?
Yeah, I can still remember some. And
Come
being,
on, then give us a bit of tic-tac.
well, first off, when I was doing the book, my dad's always been very good at maths. So, you know, you'd have somebody come up, I'll have £6 on at 13 to 8. And he'd just rattle it off. So it was pretty easy being the book and keeping tabs on it. And like I said, unless it was a really big meeting, it's not like it was difficult. But the tic-tac, I did the tic-tac when we were at certain meetings. Like I remember Ripon. So on the other side, Ripon and the Tattersills is one side, and then the cheap rings on the other side. And obviously, if any big bets come in, they're going to happen in Tattersills. So I can't remember Michael's last name, but Michael was the guy in Tattersills. I think we used to spend £2. He'd give us the card, and I would just stand behind my dad and just, you know, watch out. You know, horse number 12 is now 6 to 1. So I remember, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 4, 6 to 4, 7 to 4, 11 to 8. And it didn't take me long to learn it, but of course, when you're watching some of these tic-tacs like Michael, it was so quick, you know. And of course, I'd be terrified, you know, telling my dad, oh, by the way, it's 6 to 4 when actually it's evens, you know, and somebody comes in and puts a big bet on. So you had to be very careful in the cheap ring them days, because, you know, you couldn't lay a bet off with Betfair or Bet or what have you. You know, you are either stuck with it, and you know, so it wasn't an easy game. Like, you definitely needed to know the horses and have a bit of an idea and stuff. But I really enjoyed it. But it didn't take long to learn it. It was just more watching the guys who were doing it were very, very quick. You know, like handwriting almost, and you had to recognise that's 6 to 4 and not something else. You know.
Yeah, and these days, of course, you wouldn't be allowed to do that. Got to be 18 now. I mean, you were learning all that when you were a kid.
Yeah.
There must have been some quite big characters on the circuit. Any bookies or punters that you remember specifically?
No, I don't. I mean, there was definitely some punters that would, you know, come around regular and what have you. Particularly older guys, really nice people, like down to earth people. You know, that would be at Hexham on a Tuesday, Redcar on a Wednesday, or what have you. But we weren't in the Tattersills, so I can't really say that there was anybody that was, you know, like a major punter that I can remember. The biggest thing for me when I look back into those days is the horses. Like, I loved the fighting fifth hurdle. So Bird's Nest, Night Nurse, Sea Pigeon, Ekbalco. I can still remember, it's funny, we were at Hereford yesterday, and the horse that beat Laddie Cooper Mere was John Joe Neal's horse, and I saw him in the parade ring. He was being interviewed, so I didn't bother him or whatever. But I look at somebody like John Joe Neal, like he was a hero of mine as a jockey. And it's funny when I think of the fighting fifth or whatever. I remember when Ekbalco fell in the fighting fifth and he lost his life and whatever. I remember seeing John Joe Neal come back in tears. And, you know, when you look at people like that, I mean, the jockey, it's not a job. It's not just a job, you know. They love the horses and what have you. So seeing him yesterday kind of brings it all back as well, because he was a hero of mine with, you know, all those horses that he rode, and likes a Wayward Lad and people and horses like that.
Any apart from that, any meetings that stuck in your mind particularly?
Well, we never really came down south. So until I started having horses with Nigel, I'd never been to Newton Abbot or Exeter or Fontwell or anything like that. So Hexham, to me, will always be my favourite race course. I mean, that's just a slice of heaven. Obviously, you've got Cheltenham, which is fantastic. But we went Hexham, Carlisle, Newcastle, Jumps, Flat, Ripon. I always like Thirsk. I think Thirsk's a lovely course. So the ones that really stand out to me as far as the excitement were the Grand National. So even though we didn't come down south, we would go to the Grand National and we go to the Derby. And so when we used to go down to Derby, I remember I drove down one year. I still had my L plates. And as I drove down during the night, my dad was weighing the form. We actually got stuck in a flood. It was an automatic car. The car dried out. We got to Tattenham Corner, and we ended up having a good day and stuff. And then as soon as the racing was finished, we drove all the way back to Newcastle, just me and my dad. So it was great. I loved the Derby. I went to the Grand National. My first 3 times at the Grand National, we were in the centre of the course. I know it's all changed now, but cars were parked out there and we were out the centre of the course. I never saw a horse. 3 years on the trot, I never saw one horse at Aintree. Just so busy. I mean, people were mobbed, you know, putting bets on, all kinds of things. So I loved the atmosphere, everything.
You can tell by the way you're talking about it that you loved it. So did you never want to be, when you left school, a bookmaker and work with your dad, do it full
Well,
time?
you know, it's funny, if I hadn't have gone to America, I legitimately think I could have possibly ended up a bookmaker because I like the challenge. Like, for example, when I look at, so I've got Nigel here in England and I've got Adam Nicol up north, and I look at those, I wouldn't dare say to them, you need to do this, you need to do that. I mean, that's not I put my hand up straight away and don't know all of the X's and O's with horses. But I'm intrigued about finding a race. I'm intrigued about certain tactics and things like that. So I do have an opinion on certain things like that. But yeah, I've just loved it all along, and yeah. So.
Was your mum involved with it at all?
Yeah, my mum was. I mean, we didn't have horses or whatever, and when my mum and dad split up, we ended up. My mum had a little cottage on a farm at Heading on the Wall, just outside Heading on the Wall, and she ended up with a horse that literally cost peanuts, and she taught me how to ride when I was 15, and I mean the horse was as closest thing as you could to having a pet dog. I mean, his Sonny, his name was. It was absolutely brilliant, bomb-proof, great on the road, would do anything you asked of him. Obviously, he wasn't a thoroughbred racehorse or anything like that, but I used to ride. If I wasn't playing football, I would ride from Heading on the Wall up to Matfin and back, which might be 20 miles, going through the fields, having a canter and whatever. I absolutely loved it. So my mum did not like gambling, did not like the fact that my dad was a bookmaker or I was working at the bookmakers, but she absolutely had a mad passion for horses.
And is there anybody in the family still involved with bookmaking now?
No. My Uncle David, who passed away, God bless him, a few years ago, was never a bookmaker, but he loved a punt. He actually won a big bet many years ago with Kevin Keegan and Terry McDermott. But he loved the races, but there's nobody in the family that's connected to that. But I could have, if I'd stayed here, to go back to your first point, I could have seen myself doing that because I enjoyed the math. I enjoyed the challenge of having an opinion and trying to be clever. You know, I'm not one of these people that would, dare to stand a favourite and look to lose a lot of money or whatever. I would more be the type that would balance the books. And going back to my dad as well, back in the day, if you did get caught in the cheap ring on one big bet, you probably couldn't make it up with the other horses unless you went ridiculous prices. So again, you had to be very, very careful. So, but I honestly could have seen myself doing that, if not full time, then certainly like my dad, and been like a part-time and go to several courses and do it as much for fun and enjoyment as to necessarily make a lot of money out of it.